You need to come with me right now, Daniel said in a loud, firm voice that made everyone turn and stare. Victoria's heart pounded in her chest. Her hands started shaking. What? Why? I didn't do anything wrong, she said, her voice cracking with confusion and fear. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Daniel replied, his grip tightening on her arm as he started pulling her toward the back of the plane. The other passengers whispered to each other. Some took out their phones and started recording. An elderly white woman in seat 2B clutched her purse and nodded, as if she knew this was going to happen. A businessman in an expensive suit looked away quickly, pretending not to see anything. Victoria felt tears burning in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of all these people who were looking at her like she was some kind of criminal. Please, you're hurting me, Victoria said, trying to pull her arm free. I have my boarding pass. I have my ticket. This is my seat. We've had complaints, Daniel said flatly, not even looking at her face. Multiple passengers have expressed concerns about your behavior. My behavior? Victoria's voice rose in disbelief. I've been sitting here reading my book. I haven't said a word to anyone. But Daniel wasn't listening. He kept pulling her through the first-class cabin, past all the staring faces, past the flight attendants who looked away uncomfortably, past the cockpit where the pilot was doing pre-flight checks. Victoria's mind raced. This couldn't be happening. Not in 2024. Not on a plane from Detroit to New York. Not when she had done absolutely nothing wrong except be a young black girl sitting in first class. You're making a mistake, Victoria said, her voice shaking now. A really big mistake. Daniel finally stopped at the edge of first class, right where it met the economy section. He turned to face her for the first time, and Victoria saw something cold in his eyes. Something that told her he had already decided who she was before he ever spoke to her. The mistake, Daniel said slowly, was you thinking you could cause trouble on this flight. Now, you can either walk to economy class on your own, or I can escort you off this plane entirely. Your choice. Victoria felt like the whole world was spinning. Her stomach twisted into knots. She had been so excited this morning. Her dad had surprised her with a first-class ticket for her birthday trip to visit her grandmother in New York. She had never flown first class before. She had posted a selfie in her seat just 10 minutes ago, with the caption, "Living my best life. Airplane." Now, everyone in that cabin was looking at her like she was trash that needed to be removed. I'm not moving, Victoria said quietly, but firmly. I paid for this seat. Well, my father paid for this seat. I have every right to be here. Daniel's jaw clenched. He turned and called to one of the flight attendants. Sandra, call the captain. We might need to have this passenger removed from the aircraft. No, wait. Victoria's voice cracked. This was getting worse by the second. If they removed her from the plane, she'd miss her grandmother's birthday party. Her grandmother, who was turning 85. Her grandmother, who she only got to see once a year because of the distance. But more than that, Victoria knew what this was really about. And it made her blood boil even as tears finally started sliding down her cheeks. A man in economy class stood up to see what was happening. Just let her sit down, he called out. She's just a kid. Sir, please stay seated, Daniel barked at him. The man sat back down, but Victoria saw the anger on his face. At least someone could see how wrong this was. Sandra the flight attendant approached nervously. She was young, maybe in her mid-20s, and she looked genuinely upset. Marshal Miller, maybe we could just do your job and call the captain, Daniel interrupted her sharply. Sandra hesitated, looking at Victoria with sympathetic eyes. But then she nodded and picked up the phone. Victoria's whole body was trembling now. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands. She had to call her dad. He would fix this. He always fixed things. But before she could unlock her phone, Daniel snatched it from her hand. No phone calls until we sort this out, he said. You can't take my phone. Victoria protested. That's illegal. I'm a federal air marshal. I can do whatever is necessary for the safety of this flight. Victoria couldn't believe this was happening. Safety? What was unsafe about her sitting quietly in her assigned seat? The captain's voice suddenly came over the intercom, sounding annoyed. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a slight delay. We'll be underway shortly. Please remain in your seats with your seatbelts fastened. But Victoria wasn't in her seat. She was standing in the aisle, being humiliated in front of everyone, being treated like a criminal for absolutely no reason. Daniel leaned closer to her and lowered his voice. Listen to me very carefully. You have two options. You can walk to economy class right now with whatever dignity you have left, or I can have you escorted off this plane by airport police. Those are your only choices. Victoria looked into his eyes and saw no mercy there. No understanding. No willingness to listen. And then, through her tears and her anger and her fear, Victoria said something that would change everything. "My father," she said, her voice barely above a whisper but filled with a strength she didn't know she had, "is going to destroy you for this." Daniel actually laughed. It was a cold, mocking sound. "Sure he is, sweetheart. Sure he is." He didn't know. None of them knew. But they were about to find out exactly who Victoria Coleman's father was. And when they did, this plane wasn't going anywhere. 6 hours earlier, Victoria Coleman had woken up to the smell of her mother's famous blueberry pancakes drifting up the stairs of their home in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. Birthday girl, her mother, Patricia, had called from the kitchen. "Breakfast is ready." Victoria had jumped out of bed with a huge smile on her face. 18 years old today. Finally an adult. Finally old enough to vote, to sign her own papers, to make her own decisions. It felt like the beginning of something amazing. She had rushed downstairs in her pajamas to find the kitchen decorated with silver and gold balloons. Her mother stood at the stove, flipping pancakes, while her little brother while her little brother James sat at the table, already stuffing his face. "Happy birthday, Vic," James said through a mouthful of pancake. He was only 12, and food was always more important to him than manners. "Thanks, little man," Victoria said, ruffling his hair as she passed by to hug her mother. Patricia held her daughter tight. "My baby is 18. I can't believe it." "Mom, you're going to make me cry before breakfast," Victoria laughed. "Where's Dad?" she asked, looking around. Her father was usually up before everyone else, already on his phone handling business before the sun even came up. Patricia smiled mysteriously. "He had to leave early for a meeting. But he left something for you on the dining room table." Victoria's eyes widened. She rushed into the dining room and found a small envelope with her name written in her father's neat handwriting. Her hand shook a little as she opened it. Inside was a first-class plane ticket to New York City, leaving that afternoon. Victoria's jaw dropped. "No way. No way. What is it?" James called from the kitchen. Victoria ran back in, waving the ticket in the air. "Dad got me a first-class ticket to visit Grandma." "First class? I've never flown first class in my life." Patricia laughed at her daughter's excitement. "Your father wanted you to feel special on your birthday. And you know how much Grandma has been asking to see you." Victoria's grandmother, Dorothy, lived in a small apartment in Brooklyn. She was turning 85 next week, and Victoria hadn't seen her in over a year because of school and work. This was perfect. Too perfect. "But wait," Victoria said, her smile fading a little. "Isn't Dad upset about me taking time off from my internship?" Victoria had been interning at a marketing firm downtown for the past 3 months. Her father had gotten her the position through a business connection, and he always stressed how important it was to make a good impression, to work hard, to prove herself. Patricia shook her head. "He called them himself this morning. Told them it was a family emergency and that you'd be back on Monday." "Victoria, your father is many things, but he knows family comes first. Especially for Grandma Dorothy." Victoria felt warmth spread through her chest. Her dad could be tough sometimes. Okay, a lot of times. He had high expectations and didn't accept excuses. But moments like this reminded her why she loved him so much. "This is the best birthday ever," Victoria said, hugging the ticket to her chest. 3 hours later, Victoria stood in front of her bedroom mirror, trying to decide what to wear on a first-class flight. Did people dress up for first class? She didn't want to look like she didn't belong there. She finally settled on a nice pair of dark jeans, a cream-colored sweater, and her favorite sneakers. Casual but put together. She pulled her natural hair into a high puff and added small gold hoop earrings. Looking at herself in the mirror, Victoria felt a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. She thought about all the movies she'd seen where first-class passengers wore fancy suits and dresses, drank champagne, and acted like they owned the world. Would she fit in? Would people look at her and wonder what she was doing there? "Stop it," Victoria told her reflection firmly. "You have every right to be there. Dad paid for that ticket. You belong." But even as she said it, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered doubts. Her mother drove her to Detroit Metropolitan Airport, chatting excitedly the whole way about what Victoria should do in New York, what she should tell Grandma Dorothy, what pictures she should take. And take lots of selfies in first class. Patricia said as they pulled up to the departures area. "I want to see how fancy it is." Victoria laughed and hugged her mother goodbye. "I will, Mom. I promise. Call me when you land, baby." "I will." Victoria grabbed her small rolling suitcase and her backpack and headed into the airport. Her flight wasn't for another 2 hours, but her mother always insisted on getting everywhere early. Check-in was smooth. The woman at the counter had smiled when she saw Victoria's first-class ticket. Happy travels, Miss Coleman. You're in seat 3A. Boarding begins in about 90 minutes. Security took forever, as always, but finally Victoria was through and walking toward her gate. She stopped at a bookstore and bought a novel she'd been wanting to read, a mystery about a detective solving cold cases. When they announced first-class boarding, Victoria felt her heart skip a beat. This was it. Her first time boarding before everyone else. Her first time turning left instead of right when she got on the plane. She walked down the jet bridge with her head held high, practicing the confident walk her father always used when he entered a room. Act like you belong, he always said, and people will believe you belong. The flight attendant at the door smiled at her. Good afternoon. Welcome aboard. Thank you, Victoria said, smiling back. She stepped onto the plane and turned left into first class. The seats were huge, more like recliners than regular airplane seats. They were covered in soft leather and had so much legroom that Victoria almost gasped out loud. Seat 3A was by the window. Perfect. Victoria stowed her backpack under the seat in front of her and sat down, trying not to grin like a little kid on Christmas morning. The seat was so comfortable. It even had a pillow and a blanket already waiting for her. She took out her phone and snapped a quick selfie, making sure to get the fancy seat in the background. She posted it with the caption, "Living my best life. Airplane." Within seconds, her friends started commenting with jealous emojis and "look at you fancy" messages. Victoria settled into her seat and opened her book, feeling happy and grateful and so lucky. For the next 20 minutes, everything was perfect. Other first-class passengers boarded and took their seats. A businessman in a gray suit sat across the aisle. An elderly couple settled into the row in front of Victoria. A woman in expensive-looking clothes took the aisle seat in Victoria's row but didn't say anything, just put on headphones and closed her eyes. Victoria read her book and minded her own business. She didn't see the woman in seat 2B, the elderly white woman with the tight gray curls and the pearl necklace, turn around twice to stare at her. She didn't see that woman lean over and whisper something to the businessman in the gray suit, who glanced back at Victoria with a frown. She didn't see the woman get up and walk to the back of first class, where she spoke quietly but urgently to the flight attendant named Sandra. Victoria was too busy reading about a detective finding clues in an old murder case to notice that she was about to become the center of her own terrible mystery. She didn't look up until she heard heavy footsteps coming down the aisle. And then she saw him. A tall man with short brown hair, wearing a dark suit and a serious expression. He had a badge clipped to his belt. Air Marshal Daniel Miller stopped right next to her seat and looked down at her with cold eyes. "Excuse me, miss," he said. "I need to speak with you." Victoria looked up from her book, confused. Okay? Is something wrong? Can you step into the aisle, please?" Victoria's heart started beating faster. "Why? What's going on?" Daniel's expression hardened. "Just step into the aisle. Now." Victoria felt every eye in first class turn toward her. Her hands started to shake as she closed her book and unbuckled her seatbelt. She stood up slowly, her legs feeling wobbly. Did I do something wrong? And that's when Daniel said the words that would start everything. "We've had complaints about you. I'm going to need to see your boarding pass and ID." Victoria's hands trembled as she reached into her backpack for her boarding pass and ID. She couldn't understand what was happening. Complaints? About what? She had literally been sitting there reading a book. "Here," she said, holding out her boarding pass and driver's license. Daniel took them and examined them carefully, taking much longer than necessary. Victoria watched his eyes move from the documents to her face and back again, like he was looking for something that didn't match up. "This says seat 3A, Daniel said slowly. "Yes, that's my seat," Victoria replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "And how did you obtain this ticket?" The question hit Victoria like a slap. "What do you mean?" My father bought it for me. For my birthday." Daniel's eyebrow raised slightly. "Your father bought you a first-class ticket?" The way he said it, with that tone of disbelief, made Victoria's stomach turn. She knew exactly what he was implying. That someone like her couldn't possibly afford first class. That someone like her didn't belong here. "Yes," Victoria said, lifting her chin. "Is that a problem?" Before Daniel could answer, the woman from seat 2B, the one with the pearl necklace, spoke up loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I saw her taking pictures of the cabin when she got on," the woman said, her voice dripping with suspicion. "On her phone. Like she was casing the place." Victoria's mouth fell open. "Casing the place? I took a selfie. It's my first time in first class and I wanted to remember it." "She's been acting nervous ever since she sat down," the businessman in the gray suit added. "Looking around constantly. Very suspicious behavior." I was reading my book. Victoria's voice rose in frustration. I've barely looked up. But more passengers were joining in now, and Victoria felt like she was in a nightmare. She doesn't have any carry-on luggage except that backpack, another woman said. Don't you think that's strange? My suitcase is checked. Victoria said desperately. This is insane. Young lady, lower your voice, Daniel commanded. You're causing a disturbance. I'm causing a disturbance? Victoria couldn't believe what she was hearing. These people are making up lies about me and I'm the problem? Sandra, the flight attendant, approached nervously. Marshal Miller, I've been watching the cabin. This young lady hasn't done anything disruptive. She's been very quiet. Daniel shot Sandra a look that made her step back. I've received multiple complaints from concerned passengers. That's enough for me to take action. Complaints about what? Victoria demanded. Nobody can even say what I actually did wrong. The elderly woman in seat 2B clutched her purse tighter. I don't feel safe with her in this cabin. She clearly doesn't belong here. I mean, look at her. Look at what she's wearing. Sneakers in first class? And there it was. The real reason. Not Victoria's behavior. Not anything she had done. Just who she was. What she looked like. Victoria felt hot tears building behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She wouldn't give these people the satisfaction. There's nothing wrong with my sneakers, Victoria said quietly. And there's nothing in the rules that says what I can wear. The issue isn't your shoes, Daniel said, but his eyes told a different story. The issue is that you're making other passengers uncomfortable. By existing? Victoria shot back. By sitting in my assigned seat and reading my book? A few passengers in the back of first class shifted uncomfortably. A younger man in seat 4C pulled out his phone and started recording. Victoria saw him, but she didn't care anymore. Let him record. Let everyone see how she was being treated. I'm going to ask you one more time to cooperate, Daniel said, his voice getting harder. Either move to economy class voluntarily, or I will have you removed from this aircraft. On what grounds? Victoria demanded. Name one rule I've broken. One actual rule, not just people's feelings. Daniel stepped closer, invading her space. I don't need to explain myself to you. I'm a federal air marshal, and when I determine that a passenger is a potential security risk. A security risk? Victoria's voice cracked. Are you serious right now? A security risk because I'm a black girl in first class? The cabin went completely silent. Everyone heard it. Everyone knew what Victoria was really saying. And the uncomfortable truth hung in the air like smoke. This has nothing to do with race, Daniel said stiffly. This is about passenger safety, Anne. Don't lie to me. Victoria interrupted, her voice shaking with anger now. Don't stand there and lie to my face. If I was white, would you be doing this? If I was white, would anyone have complained? The businessman in the gray suit looked away. The woman in seat 2B huffed indignantly. But nobody answered Victoria's question. Because they all knew the answer. Sandra the flight attendant looked like she might cry. Marshal Miller, please. Maybe we could just. Sandra, call the captain. Now. Daniel's voice left no room for argument. Victoria's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst out of her chest. This couldn't be happening. Not in 2024. Not in America. Not to her. She thought about her father. About how hard he had worked to build his company from nothing. About how he always told her that success was the best response to prejudice. About how he said things were getting better, that her generation wouldn't have to face what he faced. But here she was, being kicked out of first class for absolutely no reason except the color of her skin. Please, Victoria said, and she hated how small her voice sounded. Please just let me sit down. I promise I won't bother anyone. I'll just read my book, Anne. It's too late for that, Daniel said. He reached for her arm. That's when Victoria pulled away. Don't touch me. Miss, you need to comply. I said don't touch me. Victoria's voice echoed through the cabin. You have no right to put your hands on me. I haven't done anything wrong. Daniel's face turned red. That's it. You're off this plane. He grabbed Victoria's arm, his grip tight and painful. Ow. You're hurting me. Victoria tried to pull away, but Daniel was much stronger. Stop resisting, Daniel growled. I'm not resisting. Let go of me. The man in seat 4C was definitely recording now. So were two other passengers. Sandra looked panicked. The woman in seat 2B looked satisfied, like this was exactly what she wanted to happen. And Victoria felt something break inside her. Not her spirit, no, her spirit was burning with rage. But something else. Her faith that the world was fair. Her belief that doing the right thing mattered. Her hope that people would see her for who she really was instead of what they assumed about her. Daniel dragged her toward the back of first class. Victoria stumbled, her eyes blurry with tears she could no longer hold back. "This is wrong," she said, her voice breaking. "This is so wrong." "You should have thought about that before causing trouble," Daniel replied coldly. They reached the edge of first class, right where the curtain separated it from economy. Through her tears, Victoria could see passengers in economy watching with wide eyes. Some looked angry. Some looked sad. Some looked away, like they couldn't bear to watch. Daniel pushed her against the wall, not hard enough to really hurt, but hard enough to make his point. "You can walk to economy, or you can leave this plane. Choose." Victoria looked up at him through her tears. "I'm not moving. I paid for that seat." "Your father paid for it," Daniel corrected her with a sneer. "Assuming that's even true." The insult burned. How dare he question whether her father really bought the ticket? How dare he question everything about her? "Call him," Victoria said suddenly. "Call my father. His number is in my phone. You took my phone, now use it. Call him and he'll tell you." Daniel actually laughed. "I'm not calling anyone. You're either moving right now or—" The captain's voice came over the intercom, interrupting him. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a delay. Please remain in your seats." Daniel turned to Sandra. "Get the captain on the phone. Tell him we need police to remove a passenger." Sandra hesitated, tears in her eyes. "Marshal Miller, I really don't think. That's not your job to think." Daniel snapped. "Make the call." Sandra jumped at his tone and hurried toward the phone at the front of the cabin. Victoria watched her go, feeling hopeless and helpless and so incredibly alone. All those passengers watching, recording, and not one of them was standing up for her. Not one of them was saying, "This is wrong. Leave her alone." Except, "Hey!" A voice came from economy class. "What's going on up there? Why are you treating her like that?" Daniel whipped around. "Sir, sit down and mind your business." "It is my business when I see someone getting harassed for no reason," the man shouted back. "Me too." A woman's voice joined in. "Let her sit down." More voices started rising from economy. Passengers who could see what was happening, who knew it was wrong, who finally found their courage. "Leave her alone. She's just a kid. This is discrimination." Daniel's face turned even redder. "Everyone stay in your seats or this plane isn't going anywhere." But the voices kept coming, growing louder and angrier. The people in economy class were standing up for Victoria in a way the first-class passengers never did. Victoria felt a tiny spark of hope flicker in her chest. Maybe she wasn't alone after all. Maybe someone would. Sandra returned, her face pale. "The captain wants to speak with you, Marshal Miller. He's not happy." Daniel cursed under his breath. He looked at Victoria with pure hatred in his eyes. "Don't move." He stormed toward the cockpit, leaving Victoria standing at the edge of first class, shaking and crying and surrounded by dozens of eyes. In her pocket, her phone buzzed. But she couldn't reach it. Daniel still had it. If only she could call her father. If only he knew what was happening. But her father, Marcus Coleman, no, wait, her father, Richard Coleman, CEO of Coleman Technologies, one of the largest tech companies in Michigan, was in a meeting. He had no idea that his daughter's birthday surprise had turned into a nightmare. He had no idea that in just a few minutes, he would get a notification on his phone. A news alert. A video going viral on social media. A video of his daughter being dragged through first class. And when Richard Coleman saw that video, the entire world would stop. Richard Coleman sat in the boardroom on the 23rd floor of Coleman Technologies headquarters, only half listening to the quarterly report presentation. His mind kept drifting to Victoria. By now, she should be in the air, probably enjoying those fancy first-class snacks he'd heard so much about. He smiled to himself. His little girl was 18 today. Not so little anymore. His phone sat face down on the table in front of him, on silent as always during meetings. But something made him glance at it. Maybe it was father's intuition. Maybe it was coincidence. But when he picked it up and saw 17 missed calls from his wife Patricia, his blood went cold. Patricia never called during his meetings. Never. She knew how important they were. Unless something was terribly wrong. "Excuse me," Richard said, standing abruptly. The 5 board members stopped talking and looked at him in surprise. "I need to take this. Continue without me." He walked quickly out of the boardroom, his heart pounding. Before he could even dial Patricia back, his phone started buzzing in his hand. Patricia calling again. "What's wrong?" Richard answered immediately. "Is it Victoria? Is she?" "Richard, get on Twitter right now," Patricia's voice was shaking. "Or Instagram. Or anywhere. There's a video. Of Victoria. On the plane." "What video? What are you talking about?" "Just look." Patricia was crying now. "Someone recorded it. It's everywhere. Richard, they're hurting our baby. Richard's hands shook as he pulled up Twitter on his phone. He didn't even have to search. The video was right there on his feed, already with 50,000 views and climbing fast. The title made his vision go red: Air Marshal drags black teen from first-class seat, shocking video. He pressed play. And watched his daughter, his precious daughter, being grabbed by a man twice her size. Watched her try to pull away. Watched her cry. Watched her beg them to just let her sit down. Watched her say, "This is wrong. This is so wrong." Richard Coleman had built his company from nothing. He'd faced racism, discrimination, and every obstacle imaginable. He'd been told he'd never succeed. He'd been denied loans, denied meetings, denied respect. But he'd pushed through it all with dignity and determination. But watching his daughter being treated like a criminal? Watching her cry? Watching her be humiliated in front of all those people? Something inside Richard Coleman snapped. "Patricia," he said, his voice deadly calm. "What's Victoria's flight number?" "Delta 2847. Detroit to New York." "Richard, what are you going to do?" "Whatever I have to." He hung up and immediately dialed another number. His assistant, Jennifer, answered on the first ring. "Jennifer, I need you to get me the personal cell phone number for the CEO of Delta Airlines. Right now." "Sir, Right now, Jennifer. I don't care what you have to do. Get me that number in the next 2 minutes or don't bother coming back to work." Richard had never spoken to Jennifer that harshly before, but he didn't care. His daughter was in trouble. Nothing else mattered. He pulled up the video again, his hand clenched so tight around his phone that his knuckles turned white. He watched it a second time. A third time. Each viewing made him angrier. He saw the Air Marshal's face clearly. Saw the badge on his belt. Saw the contempt in his eyes when he looked at Victoria. Richard made mental notes. The man's name would be easy to find. Air Marshals on specific flights were documented. This man's career was over. Richard would make absolutely sure of that. His phone buzzed. Jennifer, with a phone number. Richard didn't hesitate. He dialed immediately. "Hello?" An uncertain voice answered. Probably wondering who had his personal number. "Is this David Harrison, CEO of Delta Airlines?" "Yes, who is?" "My name is Richard Coleman. I'm the CEO of Coleman Technologies. And one of your Air Marshals is currently assaulting my 18-year-old daughter on flight 2847 from Detroit to New York." There was a pause. "I'm sorry, what?" "Check Twitter, Mr. Harrison. It's already going viral. 50,000 views in the last 10 minutes. My daughter was sitting in her assigned first-class seat, a seat that I purchased for her birthday, when your Air Marshal dragged her out of it based on complaints from racist passengers. The video shows everything." Richard heard typing on the other end. Then a sharp intake of breath. "Mr. Coleman, I'm just seeing this now. I had no idea." "I don't care about excuses," Richard cut him off. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to contact that flight right now. You're going to tell your pilot to return my daughter to her seat with a full apology. And you're going to ground that Air Marshal immediately." "Mr. Coleman, I understand you're upset, but I can't just." "Can't?" Richard's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Let me tell you what you can't do, Mr. Harrison. You can't afford what's about to happen to Delta Airlines if you don't fix this immediately. Coleman Technologies has a $70 million contract with Delta for your digital infrastructure. That contract can disappear with one phone call. And trust me, after this video hits the news, and it will hit the news, you're going to need all the positive press you can get. Mr. Coleman, please, let's not be hasty." "I'm not being hasty. I'm being a father. My daughter is terrified right now. She's crying. She's being treated like a criminal for the crime of being black in first class. So you're going to fix this, Mr. Harrison. Right now. Or I'm going to make it my personal mission to destroy Delta Airlines' reputation so thoroughly that you'll wish you'd never heard my name." Another pause. Longer this time. Richard could practically hear the calculations happening in the CEO's mind. The money. The publicity. The lawsuit that would inevitably come. "I'll contact the flight immediately," David Harrison said quietly. "Give me 5 minutes." "You have 3. Richard hung up. His phone immediately rang again. "Patricia. Did you see it?" she asked through tears. "Did you see what they did to her?" "I saw it." Richard's jaw was clenched so tight it hurt. "I'm handling it. Richard, I want to sue them. I want to sue everyone on that plane who just sat there and watched. We will. But first, I'm getting our daughter back in her seat." Richard's phone buzzed with another call. He looked at the screen. David Harrison, calling back already. That was fast. "Hold on, Patricia." He switched calls. "What?" Mr. Coleman, I've contacted the flight, Harrison said. I spoke directly with the captain. He's not happy about what happened. He had no idea the Air Marshal was removing a passenger. He thought it was just a delay for some other reason. I don't care about the captain's feelings. What about Victoria? The captain has ordered the Air Marshal to return your daughter to her seat immediately. He's also filing a formal complaint about the Air Marshal's conduct. Mr. Coleman, I want you to know that this is not how Delta operates. This is not our policy. And there will be consequences. You're damn right there will be, Richard said. But we're not done. Not even close. I want that Air Marshal's name. I want the names of every passenger who complained about my daughter. And I want a formal apology from Delta Airlines, in writing, within 24 hours. You'll have it. Mr. Coleman, I'm truly sorry about. Save it for the press conference you're going to have to give when this story explodes, Richard interrupted. Just fix it. Now. He hung up and switched back to Patricia. They're putting her back in her seat. Patricia let out a sob of relief. Thank God. Thank God. Can you call her? The Air Marshal took her phone. But I'm going to make sure she gets it back. Richard was already pulling up another number. I'm calling some people. I'll call you back. Over the next 10 minutes, Richard Coleman made 7 phone calls. First, to his lawyer. I'm suing Delta Airlines and I want you to start the paperwork immediately. Second, to his PR team. There's a video going viral of Victoria being mistreated on a Delta flight. I want a statement ready within the hour. Make it clear that this is unacceptable and that we're taking legal action. Third, to a journalist friend at the Detroit Free Press. I'm giving you an exclusive. My daughter was racially profiled on a Delta flight. I have the video. Are you interested? Fourth, to 3 local news stations with the same offer. Fifth, to his own social media manager. Post the video on all our company accounts. Add a statement. This is Richard Coleman's 18-year-old daughter being removed from first class for no reason except racism. This is unacceptable. We demand justice. Sixth, to the head of the NAACP in Michigan. I need your help making sure this doesn't get swept under the rug. Seventh, to his wife. It's done. The whole world is about to know what happened to our daughter. And Delta is going to pay. But Richard wasn't satisfied. Not yet. Because Victoria was still on that plane. Still surrounded by those people who had watched her be humiliated and done nothing. He looked at his watch. The flight was supposed to take off 20 minutes ago. But it was still on the ground. Still at the gate. Good. Richard opened his laptop and pulled up the contact information for Detroit Metropolitan Airport. He found the number for the control tower. This was going to be his most important call yet. Detroit Tower, this is Richard Coleman. I'm the CEO of Coleman Technologies, and I need to speak with whoever is in charge of authorizing takeoffs right now. Sir, this is an unusual request. I don't care if it's unusual. Flight 2847 is at one of your gates. My daughter is on that flight. And that flight is not taking off until I personally verify that she's safe and that the situation has been resolved. Do you understand? Sir, I don't have the authority to. Then get me someone who does. Richard's voice boomed through his office. That plane is not leaving the ground until I say so. Get me your supervisor. Now. Back on flight 2847, Victoria Coleman stood in the aisle, still shaking, still crying, waiting to see what would happen next. She had no idea that her father had just set the world on fire to protect her. She had no idea that the video of her humiliation was being viewed by hundreds of thousands of people. She had no idea that in the cockpit, Captain James Peterson was getting phone call after phone call from people much more important than an air marshal. She had no idea that her father was about to do something that no CEO had ever done before. Richard Coleman was about to ground an entire airplane with nothing but the power of his name and his money and his absolute refusal to let anyone hurt his daughter, and when that plane stayed on the ground, everyone would know why. Everyone would know that you don't mess with Richard Coleman's family. Not ever. Captain James Peterson had been flying planes for 23 years. He'd flown through storms, dealt with mechanical failures, handled medical emergencies at 30,000 feet, and navigated every kind of difficult situation imaginable. But he had never, not once, had a day like this. Captain Peterson, his co-pilot, Lisa Chang, said nervously. We have another call. This one's from airport operations. James rubbed his temples. In the last 15 minutes, he'd received calls from Delta's CEO, Delta's head of operations, the FAA regional director, and now airport operations. All about the same thing. The girl in seat 3A. He picked up the radio. This is Captain Peterson. Captain, this is Gerald Torres from Airport Operations. We've received a direct request from Richard Coleman, CEO of Coleman Technologies, that Flight 2847 remain at the gate until he can verify his daughter's safety. James felt a headache building behind his eyes. And who exactly is Richard Coleman to be making demands about my flight? Sir, Coleman Technologies handles about 40% of our airport's digital security infrastructure. Mr. Coleman is, well, he's someone we need to keep happy. He's threatening to pull his contracts if his daughter isn't treated properly. His daughter is the girl my Air Marshal removed from first class? Yes, sir. James looked at Lisa, who looked back at him with wide eyes. This was getting bigger by the second. Get me Daniel Miller, James said into the intercom. Right now. While he waited, James pulled out his phone and did something he never did during pre-flight. He checked social media. What he saw made his stomach drop. The video had over 200,000 views now. The comments were brutal. This is disgusting. That poor girl. Fire everyone involved. I'm never flying Delta again. This is 2024 and we're still dealing with this racism? And then James saw something that made his blood run cold. A tweet from Coleman Technologies' official account with over 5 million followers. This is our CEO's 18-year-old daughter, Victoria Coleman, being removed from first class on Delta Flight 2847 for no reason except the color of her skin. This is unacceptable. We demand immediate action and justice. Hashtag Justice for Victoria. The tweet had been retweeted 30,000 times in 15 minutes. Dear God, James whispered. There was a knock on the cockpit door. James opened it to find Daniel Miller standing there, looking annoyed. You wanted to see me, Captain? James gestured for him to come in and shut the door. Then he held up his phone with the video playing. Want to explain this to me, Marshal Miller? Daniel's face went pale as he watched himself drag Victoria through the cabin. I was responding to passenger complaints. Multiple complaints about suspicious behavior. What suspicious behavior? James demanded. I've been reviewing the cabin footage. That girl was sitting in her seat reading a book. That's it. That's all she did. The passengers said she was acting nervous, taking pictures. She took one selfie. It's her birthday and her first time in first class. James could feel his anger rising. Do you have any idea what you've done? I was following protocol. You were not following protocol. James slammed his hand on the console. Protocol is to assess an actual threat. Not to remove a teenage girl because some racist passengers felt uncomfortable. Do you know who her father is? Daniel shifted uncomfortably. She said something about her father, but Richard Coleman, CEO of Coleman Technologies. Net worth approximately $2 billion. And right now, he's using every bit of that money and influence to make sure this flight doesn't move until his daughter is taken care of. Daniel's face went from pale to white. I didn't know. It shouldn't matter who her father is. James shouted. You should never have removed her in the first place. But since you did, let me explain what's happening right now. That video has over 200,000 views. It's on the news. Delta's CEO has personally called me twice. The FAA is involved. Airport operations is involved. And Mr. Coleman is threatening to ground this entire plane until he speaks with his daughter. He can't do that, Daniel said weakly. He's doing it. James pulled up another screen. I've got 3 different people telling me not to take off. Mr. Coleman has enough influence that people are actually listening to him. Lisa leaned over. Captain, we have another call. This one says it's Richard Coleman personally. James took a deep breath. Put him through. He picked up the radio. Mr. Coleman, this is Captain James Peterson. Captain Peterson. The voice on the other end was calm, but there was steel underneath it. I'm going to keep this simple. My daughter Victoria is on your plane. She was assaulted by your Air Marshal for no reason other than racism. I've seen the video. The whole world has seen the video. And that plane is not taking off until I know she's safe. Mr. Coleman, I understand your concern. Do you have children, Captain Peterson? The question caught James off guard. Yes. 2 daughters. Then you understand. If someone grabbed your daughter, dragged her through an airplane, made her cry, humiliated her in front of dozens of people, what would you do? James looked at Daniel Miller, who was standing there sweating. I'd want justice, sir. Exactly. So here's what's going to happen. Your Air Marshal is going to return my daughter to her seat. He's going to give her back her phone. And he's going to apologize. A real apology, not some half-hearted corporate nonsense. Then, you're going to call me back and let me speak to Victoria so I can verify she's okay. After that, and only after that, your plane can take off. Are we clear? James wanted to argue. Wanted to say that passengers can't dictate what happens on his aircraft. But he looked at Daniel Miller and felt nothing but disgust. Crystal clear, Mr. Coleman. Give me 10 minutes. You have 5. The line went dead. James turned to Daniel. Get that girl's phone. Return it to her. Apologize. And then get off my plane. Captain, I'm assigned to this flight. Not anymore, you're not. Delta's CEO has already suspended you pending investigation. You're done. Daniel's jaw dropped. You can't. I didn't. You did this to yourself. Now go fix what you can before this gets even worse. Daniel left the cockpit, his face red with anger and embarrassment. James picked up the intercom to address the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're going to have a slight additional delay while we resolve a passenger issue. I apologize for the inconvenience and appreciate your patience. In first class, Victoria was still standing near the curtain, surrounded by stares and whispers. Her eyes were red from crying. Her hands were still shaking. She watched Daniel Miller walk toward her, and she flinched instinctively. Miss Coleman, Daniel said stiffly. He held out her phone. I'm returning your phone to you. Victoria grabbed it quickly, holding it close to her chest like it was a lifeline. And, Daniel continued, the words clearly painful for him, I apologize for the misunderstanding. You're welcome to return to your seat. Misunderstanding? Victoria's voice was hoarse from crying. That's what you're calling it? Daniel's jaw clenched. Your seat is available, Miss Coleman. He turned and walked away before Victoria could say anything else. Sandra the flight attendant approached gently. Miss Coleman, can I help you back to your seat? Victoria looked at seat 3A. Her book was still there. Her blanket was still there. But everything felt different now. Poisoned. Ruined. I don't want to sit there anymore, Victoria said quietly. I completely understand, Sandra said kindly. How about we move you to a different first-class seat? Away from those people? Sandra gestured toward seat 2B, where the woman with the pearl necklace sat looking smug despite everything that had happened. Victoria nodded. Okay. Sandra helped her gather her things and moved her to seat 1A, the very front of first class, as far from the complaining passengers as possible. She also brought Victoria a bottle of water and some tissues. I'm so sorry, Sandra whispered. For what it's worth, I never thought you did anything wrong. And I told the captain that. Thank you, Victoria managed to say. Her phone buzzed. Multiple notifications flooded in now that she had it back. Text messages from her mom. From her friends. From people she didn't even know. And then she saw the video. Someone had recorded everything and posted it. Victoria watched herself being grabbed, dragged, humiliated. She watched herself cry and beg and plead. She felt sick. But then her phone rang. Dad calling. Victoria answered with shaking hands. Daddy? Baby girl. Her father's voice cracked. Are you okay? And just like that, Victoria broke down completely. All the fear, all the anger, all the humiliation came pouring out in huge, gasping sobs. Daddy, they grabbed me. They said I didn't belong. They took my phone. Everyone was staring and nobody helped me and I was so scared. I know, baby. I know. I saw the video. The whole world saw it. And I'm so sorry you had to go through that. I didn't do anything wrong. Victoria cried. I was just sitting there and they acted like I was a criminal. You didn't do anything wrong, Richard said firmly. Not one single thing. This is on them. All of them. The Air Marshal, the passengers who complained, the airline for letting it happen. This is their fault, not yours. I want to come home, Victoria whispered. I don't want to be on this plane anymore. Richard was quiet for a moment. Victoria could hear him breathing, could imagine him pacing in his office the way he always did when he was thinking hard about something. Victoria, listen to me carefully. You have 2 choices right now. You can get off that plane and come home. I'll have a car pick you up in 15 minutes. I'll handle everything. Or, you can stay on that plane and fly to New York in the first-class seat that I paid for, because you have every right to be there. But Dad, I know you're scared. I know you're hurt. But if you get off that plane, those people win. They'll feel justified in what they did. They'll think they were right about you. But if you stay? If you sit in that seat with your head held high? You show them and everyone watching that you belong anywhere you want to be. Victoria wiped her eyes with the tissues Sandra had given her. What if they try something else? They won't. I guarantee it. The Air Marshal is off the plane. The captain knows exactly who you are. Delta's CEO is personally monitoring this situation. And baby, the whole internet is on your side. There are thousands of people watching that video and saying, that could be my daughter. That could be me. You're not alone anymore. Victoria looked around the cabin. Some passengers were looking at her with sympathy now. Some looked ashamed. The man in seat 4C, the one who'd recorded everything, gave her a small nod of support. I'm scared, Daddy. I know. But you're also Richard Coleman's daughter. And Colemans don't run from fights. We face them head on. What do you want to do, Victoria? Victoria thought about her grandmother Dorothy waiting in New York. About the birthday party she'd be missing. About how excited she'd been this morning. She thought about the woman in seat 2B who'd complained about her. About Daniel Miller and his cold eyes. About everyone who'd assumed she didn't belong. And she felt her fear begin to transform into something else. Something harder. Something stronger. Anger. I want to stay, Victoria said, her voice getting steadier. I want to fly to New York. In first class. In the seat you bought for me. She could hear the pride in her father's voice. That's my girl. I'll be on the phone with you until you take off. And baby? When you land in New York, there's going to be reporters. News cameras. A lot of attention. You don't have to talk to anyone if you don't want to. What if I do want to? Victoria asked. Richard laughed, a real laugh this time. Then you tell them exactly what happened. You tell the truth. And you let the world know that Victoria Coleman doesn't back down from anybody. Captain Peterson's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been cleared for departure. Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff. Victoria settled back into seat 1A. She buckled her seatbelt. She wiped the last of her tears from her face. We're about to take off, Dad, she said. I love you so much, Victoria. Happy birthday, baby girl. I love you too, Daddy. Victoria hung up and looked out the window as the plane began to pull away from the gate. Her birthday hadn't gone the way she'd planned. Not at all. But as Flight 2847 finally lifted off the ground, Victoria Coleman made herself a promise. She would never forget this day. And she would never let anyone make her feel like she didn't belong ever again. The plane climbed higher into the sky, leaving Detroit behind. But the story of what happened on Flight 2847 was just beginning. By the time Victoria landed in New York 3 hours later, #JusticeForVictoria was trending worldwide. The video had been viewed over 2 million times. News outlets across the country were covering the story. Civil rights organizations were calling for investigations. And Delta Airlines was facing the biggest public relations crisis in its history. Victoria walked off that plane with her head held high, straight into a crowd of reporters and cameras. Miss Coleman. How do you feel? Will you be pressing charges? What do you want to say to the people who did this to you? Victoria stopped. She looked directly into the cameras. And she spoke in a clear, strong voice that didn't shake at all. My name is Victoria Coleman. I'm 18 years old. Today was supposed to be a happy birthday trip to see my grandmother. Instead, I was removed from my seat, grabbed, and treated like a criminal for no reason except the color of my skin. What happened to me was wrong. It was racist. And it needs to stop happening to anyone, ever again. She paused, looking directly into the camera. To the Air Marshal who grabbed me, you were wrong. To the passengers who complained about me, you were wrong. And to Delta Airlines, you need to do better. Because this isn't just about me. This is about every black person who's ever been made to feel like they don't belong somewhere. Every person who's been judged before they even opened their mouth. Every kid who's been taught that they have to be twice as good to get half as far. Victoria's voice got stronger with every word. I'm not going to stay quiet. I'm not going to pretend this didn't happen. And I'm not going to let anyone make me feel small ever again. My father taught me that I belong anywhere I choose to be. And from now on, I'm going to make sure everyone knows that. The reporters erupted with more questions, but Victoria was done. She walked through the crowd, found her grandmother waiting with tears streaming down her face, and fell into her arms. My brave, beautiful girl, Grandma Dorothy whispered. I'm so proud of you. Behind them, the world was changing. Within 24 hours, Daniel Miller would be fired. 3 of the passengers who complained would be identified and publicly shamed. Delta Airlines would announce major policy changes and sensitivity training for all staff. The FAA would launch an investigation into Air Marshal conduct. And Richard Coleman would file a $50 million lawsuit that would settle for an undisclosed amount, with all proceeds going to civil rights organizations fighting discrimination. But more than that, Victoria's story would spark a national conversation about racism, profiling, and who gets to decide who belongs in spaces of privilege and comfort. Hundreds of people would come forward with their own stories of discrimination on airplanes, in stores, in restaurants, in places where they had every right to be. And slowly, too slowly, but surely, things would begin to change. All because one 18-year-old girl refused to move from her seat. All because one father refused to let his daughter be treated unjustly. All because sometimes, the right person gets targeted at exactly the right time, and the whole world is watching. Victoria Coleman's birthday hadn't gone as planned. But it had given her something more valuable than a first-class flight. It had given her a voice. And she was never going to let anyone silence it again. Victoria Coleman went on to become a civil rights attorney, specializing in discrimination cases. She never forgot what happened on Flight 2847, and she dedicated her life to making sure others wouldn't have to experience what she did. Daniel Miller lost his job and his pension. He became a cautionary tale in Air Marshal training programs across the country. And every year on her birthday, Victoria posts the video that changed her life, with a simple caption: "Never forget. Never stop fighting. Never let anyone tell you that you don't belong." Because she does belong. They all do. And that's a truth worth fighting for.